On today's show, we are talking to Eric Jackson, the founder of EMJ Capital and a big fan of Opendoor. Thanks for being on the show today, Eric.
Great to be with you, Zaid.
Well, we got to talk about Opendoor. Obviously, it's making a lot of buzz recently over the past few weeks. I think you're a big reason for that. Your viral tweet back in July talked about how Opendoor has a potential to be 100-bagger. So, and that kind of put Opendoor on the map for a lot of investors, especially retail investors.
Yeah,
So, for the listeners, can you talk through your bull case for Opendoor and where you see the future of the company?
sure. Well, it's changed. When I initially tweeted on July 14th about it, I was thinking of it as a comp to Carvana. And so
Mhm.
Carvana, most people know now, like it's the online, e-commerce way of transacting with, for a used car. And most of us have seen the big vending machines, on the interstate. For Carvana, or they bring it to your house and kind of on a flatbed and drop it in front of your house. They were like a go growth stock from like 2017 until like 2021, growing like crazy. Went to $400 a share from like an initial IPO price of like $10 or $15, something like that. And then they went down from 400 to $3.50 in December 2022, and now have come all the way back to $400. And so obviously, like they were plagued by a lot of debt. There were some questions about how they could survive the rapid hike in interest rates, and people obviously a lot of people didn't think they'd make it, but they did, and they had a great management team. They sort of bet on themselves. They kept grinding away. They changed from like a growth at all costs mentality to profitability focus, and it turned out that their value proposition was resonating, and they're in a big fragmented market where they're disrupting the traditional car dealerships, and they're scratching away and kind of getting more and more market share, kind of almost like same playbook as Tesla. Tesla is now up to like 10% market share nationally. So Opendoor is sort of trying to do the same thing, except being an online platform for real estate, buying and selling your house as
Right.
opposed to your cars. So it's a bigger ticket item, obviously, but when it works, it's the same kind of value proposition, sort of quick and easy, disrupts the traditional agents. Why am I paying this agent, 35 grand to sell my house when they, basically, got a lead off of Zillow or something for it. And they have had to kind of raise a lot of debt. There were questions, the IPO through a SPAC in 2021, I think it was, and had a similar kind of downfall, like Carvana going from $39 as an all-time high to as late as just June 25th, they were at 51 cents. And yet, when I looked at them, back, in June, July, to me, it seemed like they were just at the point where they were starting to make the turn, similar to kind of what I saw in Carvana. And Carvana, I'd followed, a lot on the way up and down and then up again. And I did get into them, Carvana, at $15 a share, not
Wow.
$3.50. And it kind of rode that up quite a ways, and made a big deal about it. I was on CNBC, in June 2023 when they were like $24, and I was sort of like banging the drum saying, this is a great company. Our AI model spotted it. You might want to like pay attention to this. And I was kind of, got a lot of skepticism from the host when I was interviewed about it. Afterwards, like the producer said, we don't want you to talk about names like Carvana on CNBC anymore. People only care about the Mag 7. They only want to hear about Tesla and Nvidia. We don't want these like little names that nobody's ever heard of and pay attention to. And there certainly it wasn't a meme stock.
Mhm.
And nobody was looking for the next Carvana like they are now, because nobody thought a Carvana was possible to go from 400 to 3 to back to 400. So Opendoor, anyway, like is sort of the opportunity to get it right from the bottom to the top. Or at least that's what I initially saw on July 14th. And I simply looked out and saw that in 3 years from now, in 2028, if you looked at what they should be doing from a top line revenue perspective, and then you sort of looked at like what does Carvana get from a multiple perspective, it looked like $82 a share was more reasonable, not the 51 cents or the 80 cents when I was looking at it. And that's sort of how I constructed my original argument, put it out there, and it seemed to resonate. And, it started snowballing since. Now, I've since learned more about the company. I have sort of like updated thoughts, but that's initially how it happened.
Right. So you thought it was going to be a Carvana 2.0. Now you're thinking, I think I heard your comments talking about how they could potentially be a Airbnb model, asset light. You also call them the Google for housing, which kind of sounds like what Zillow is. Can you talk me through what you've learned about the company now and what your updated thinking is?
Sure. So, Google for housing, Airbnb for housing, Uber for housing, I think are probably like all those three are the best way to think about it. Like, if you think about all those examples, they've all come in and kind of e-commerceified some area that,
But don't we
traditionally
have that with Zillow though? Isn't that what Zillow is? People go on Zillow and look for a house or potential houses for sale in the area.
buyers go onto Zillow,
Right,
sellers
buyers.
go onto Opendoor. And the
Okay.
difference is between and sort of sellers are the key. Sellers are the reason where like the value of the kind of all the transactions that flow from there come from. So it's sort of the sellers are important, and that's why Zillow is not as positioned as well as an Opendoor. Um, why is Google valued the way it is? It's because of search intent. It's because what you and I go and we want to find something out, and from that intent, Google's able to build this $2.5 trillion company, basically, and they've sucked up like 38% of the total global online ad market. They gobble that up, and so it's because when I go to Zillow and I'm just like, what's my house worth, or what's going on, like. What
Or
are
you
some
daydream
interesting.
about buying a mansion in San Diego. I mean, I've been there.
Yeah, so it's an ad based model. It's also like they pass you off to an agent, traditional agent, right?
Right.
And then I'm back in the whole traditional agent world. With Opendoor, I'm going there with I want to sell my house. I want to know what my house is worth. And what's interesting about Opendoor is that they can tell you, we will pay you this amount. Maybe I think my house is worth $400,000. I'll probably go on to Opendoor and I'll get an offer for it. We can send you $375,000 for your house,
Right.
guaranteed in 45 days. It'll be wired into your account. You have that certainty of knowing that that's the case. Now they can and sometimes they've stepped up and they've had to kind of be the iBuyer that actually buys the house at that level, thinking that we'll be able to flip this thing in a few weeks or months, hopefully, for 400,000, and so we'll get this off of our balance sheet. And so there are a lot of people in America where that they need speed, they need certainty, and they don't want to just put their house up for a listing with an agent for 6 months or 8 months or some indeterminate period. So that is a core value proposition. Now, Opendoor recently has sort of made a push where, hey, let's partner with agents, and then let's talk to agents and see if they can do better than 375K for Eric, and if they do 425K, hey, I do better. I sell my house again in that 45-day period, and Opendoor makes a little bit more money off because they share in the agent commission that gets generated from that referral. So what's really interesting, though, in this sort of new approach is that the reason why a lot of people hate Opendoor is because of all the debt and because of the
Right.
iBuy, and they say this isn't a business model that works. Nobody can make money off of it. Zillow got out of the business to just go back to ads. Redfin got out of the business to go back to brokerage. Why should we support this kind of business? They can go to a pure Airbnb asset light model. Airbnb doesn't own any of the houses it owns. Why is it valued so much? Why is it valued in the billions of dollars? Because they have the brand trust with people. Both the people that are interested in renting the places and the people that want to list their places as that interface.
Well, they're a marketplace, though, right? They're a marketplace connecting buyers and sellers. That's what Uber is, connecting riders and people that need a
Right.
ride. Is that what you see Opendoor being, like a marketplace?
Absolutely. There's nobody who's taken up the mantle for real estate, which is a $20 trillion residential real estate, $20 trillion market in the U.S. alone. 14 trillion of those 20 trillion are people that have mortgages tied to their homes. That's an enormous market. It's way bigger. And if you go international, which they probably should after they perfect things here in the U.S., like it's obviously like multiples of that. But there's nobody who's become the Airbnb for that residential real estate market, the Uber for that residential real estate market. Opendoor is perfectly positioned to do that. The prior management and board have been asleep at the switch and allowing this company just to die on the vine down to 51 cents, allowing the prior CEO to dump shares on retail shareholders at 56 cents a share. Probably, if the people that ran Rocket Mortgage had a brain, they probably would have scooped this thing up for 80 cents a share. I bet you the board for Opendoor would have signed off on it. I bet you they would have slapped each other on the back and said, boy, that was a tough one. Woo! Glad we got that mess off our hands. And nobody on CNBC, nobody in the Wall Street Journal would have written a story saying this is a travesty. The Airbnb for housing just got sold for 82 cents to Rocket Mortgage. And they probably would have been embedded in Rocket. Rocket wouldn't have known what to do with it because all they do is sell plain vanilla mortgages anyway. They don't have the same kind of trusted relationship with the sellers, which is the key here. And nothing would have happened. We would never have had this Airbnb interface for this massive real estate market.
I want to talk about some of the mistakes that the management made over the last 2 to 3 years. The previous CEO, Carrie Wheeler, she stepped down. You weren't a big fan of hers, like you just said. Can you walk me through some of the biggest mistakes the previous management made over the last few years, and what you want to see in the new CEO that's going to take over?
Well, it's easy to compare them to Carvana. And one of the things that was really special about Carvana is that in 2022, when their stock was melting down from $400 to $3.50, the CEO and founder, Ernie Garcia Jr., bought himself $70 million, that's 70, worth of Carvana stock at that price, in 2022, as it was sort of declining. So I don't care what anybody says. Oh, he's rich. That's not, even for a rich guy, that's not couch cushion change, that he's putting into this stock. That's real money. And nobody, most executives are just use their options in stock just like as ATM machines to dump, and like buy their new cottage or their second house or their fourth house or whatever it is. Whenever insiders buy, you got to sit up and take notice. Because nobody buys to set money on fire. What was also interesting is that they had 2 junior management people on the Carvana management team. One guy who's the chief product officer, Dan Gill, who bought $2 million worth of stock in Thanksgiving 2022 at $7.50. Another guy who bought $700,000 worth of Carvana stock. You never see, second tier management people like that spending that kind of money. Like, if I went home and I told my wife after my stock, my whole compensation is tied up in this one company effectively, right? Affecting my wife, my family, my kids, and the stock's gone from $400 to $7 in a year and a half. Okay, and now I go home around the kitchen table after the kids go to sleep. I say, honey, you know what I want to do? I want to take $2 million of our money and stick it in this stock that all your friends are telling you at the club is going down the toilet and it's going to go bankrupt. Is that okay with you? That I don't know about you and your wife, but like that would be
that'd be a tough conversation. Yeah.
That'd be a tough spell. And Dan Gill, to his credit, chief product officer, won that argument out. So you knew that these guys believed. So anyway, there's been no buying at Opendoor. Carrie was a corporate finance person. She came up through Goldman Sachs, TPG. She was the CFO at Opendoor after coming in off the board. And she was sort of like right place, right time where the prior founder left, it was this worry, concern, angst. Like they bought all these houses in 2021 that were worth a lot less than they paid for them and they're stuck on their balance sheet. So she sort of stepped up. To her credit, she steadied the ship. I mean, she's done some things like make a push into the sort of asset-light marketplace. But she's not a tech person. She's not a finance person. And to move forward, this company has to totally revolutionize themselves effectively as an AI first company.
What does that look like? What does an AI first real estate marketplace company look like?
Well, in terms of the people that work there, they got to have a tech background. They got to have AI experience. I mean, all the best AI people that Opendoor had left to go work at Meta and OpenAI. So you got to have the best and brightest there who really think, hey, I want to be part of the Airbnb for U.S. residential real estate here, and
But what does AI look like? Is it just helping with inspections or better valuations and offers to when it comes to buying a house? But you're not even going to be doing that anymore because you're trying to, or the company's trying to pivot to an asset light model. What does AI look like in a real estate company besides like the obvious stuff of like helping with like paperwork and data entry, things like that? But what
they,
makes, how would you stand out? Like what would you do?
they have to make the whole process faster and cheaper and more pleasurable than it is now. They have to move from like a 45-day close to a 1 day close or 2 day
Gotcha.
close, 3 day close. They have to have lots of partners, obviously. Buyers who can. They have to. They have to have people that actually buy the houses that will kind of make that initial kind of lower bid offer. That gives somebody at least the price certainty that they know that this thing can be sold for X, whatever it is. And they have to have partners like agents or whoever to potentially kind of work with them. They need to go after and push in a political perspective for something called assumable mortgages. These are mortgages now which only are applied to like 20% of the mortgages out there. They're mostly VA related, where if you have a 3% mortgage today and you want to move from Houston, Texas to Raleigh, North Carolina, you can port your mortgage with you. You don't have to like give up your 3% mortgage and get a 7% mortgage in Raleigh. Why not make that national? You could do that today. Donald Trump could do that today. Bill Pulte could do that today with no inflationary effects. And
Well, that would unlock the housing market, because the reason the housing market is frozen is because no one wants to move because the mortgage
right.
rates are too high. Yeah,
and it would
that would be big.
and it would dramatically lower the cost of housing because essentially you have more buyers and sellers out there able to transact, interested in transacting. So if is there anything more important than U.S. home affordability for any of these politicians these days? I mean, come on. I mean, it's all about cost of living, and there's nothing that costs more than housing. So that's an easy win for the Trump administration to get behind. So they need to push for that. I mean, that's not AI in itself, but assuming like they got that permission, so then you have like obviously much more volumes that you got to process much more quickly. There's things like borrowing against your crypto. They should allow people to that maybe don't qualify at a bank today for a mortgage, but they bought a bunch of Bitcoin back in 2018. And they should be able to borrow against that. They don't want to sell it because they think Bitcoin's going to go to the moon still. But why not be able to borrow against that and buy a house? Why not be able to transact?
Well, a skeptical person would say like you're already dealing with. I mean, they already got screwed when they bought in houses at a higher price, and then they're stuck with them on the balance sheet because the prices for the houses came down. Now you let someone borrow against crypto. That's a volatile asset right there, way more volatile in the housing market. You let people borrow against crypto. You don't know what the crypto industry, you know what I'm saying? With the crypto market, it could have a 20% drop overnight. Now, what does that look like? Doesn't that put the company at even bigger risk than what they're facing today?
No, I mean, these are all manageable problems. I mean, I said like again, like does Airbnb take any risk? Is there is there
I'm
issues that
still a little confused about that though, because like I know what I know what you want to go asset light, but if you just want to be a marketplace, then what really matters is the housing market improve and there's more transactions. I'm still a little confused on like connecting the buyers and sellers, because I mean if you're a seller, you're looking for a buyer. I mean, you go through an agent right now. You want to be the agent that kind of does the transaction in the middle. So I guess you're saying you would have a pool of buyers and a pool of sellers, and you're connecting them to. So is the pool of I'm just trying to understand how that's any different than what the situation we have today. Like that's what we have right now. The only difference is that we have a real estate agent in between. But I'm still a little like I don't have clarity on how you see that working.
like how much more efficient is getting your Uber versus calling your local cab company in Houston? In the old days, I mean, it's obviously like way more efficient to dial it up on your phone.
But it's a lot. But you would need to have like a big pool of buyers
Yeah.
and sellers in
Oh,
order
yeah.
to make this happen.
Absolutely. You got to be the dominant player. You got to be the big dog, and they have that ability. The mantle is sitting there for them to pick up, because again, it's all about sellers and seller intent. and that they have that, and Rocket Mortgage doesn't have that. The banks don't have that.
Do you?
Nobody
So are
else
you?
has.
Are you saying you partner with private equity or some of these big firms and try to come
They,
in and be
they
buyers
get
in some of these houses?
they get 1.5 million requests a year for firm offers on houses today. Okay, so I think that puts them like less than 1% of the annual transactions in the U.S. But that's way more than anybody else, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the mother's milk here. Okay, that's the mother's. So then everything flows from there. How do we architect a marketplace, an Airbnb that takes advantage of that constant? As long as we, why did people advertise on Google? It's because they got the people going there typing searches in the search bar. So everybody will beat a path to your door if you've got that huge inflow of interest and intent, and everything flows from there, and nobody else has that. So they didn't realize they had that. So you're saying, like, what was the problem with Carrie? I don't think she realized what they had. I don't think the board realized the potential here. And so I don't think they ever thought, like, Airbnb of real estate. Oh, what's that? We're just kind of trying to survive here, like, oh
Right.
gosh, we're just iBuying our way into oblivion here. So I just think it's an enormous opportunity. I think the stock market agrees with me. And I think that's why it's around $4 today and not 51 cents like on June 25th. But they got to pick the right CEO now, and they have to be a little bit more responsive than they
Do,
have been to the retail shareholders who've seen all this vision way ahead of anybody inside the company.
do you think that it's important for whoever the next CEO is to have good communication and like a relationship with retail investors, kind of like what GameStop did with Ryan Cohen, and he kind of embraced the whole meme stock nature of the company? Do you see that as an important thing to do for the company moving forward?
100%. I don't think Ryan Cohn's the poster child for how Opendoor should act. I think he's actually been a terrible steward of that business. I mean, I think that to be frank, I think that is a terrible business. I mean, you couldn't pay
Yeah.
me to buy GameStop stock. Why would I want to own that business? It's a terrible retail business, and there's plenty of other more interesting Bitcoin treasury businesses. So I don't think he's done a great job. I think the model is Alex Karp at Palantir. I
Okay.
think they're the stock that I think before Opendoor was the number one retail loved stock, and it's been that way basically since they IPO'd five years ago. And I checked this morning, and they're basically trading now at 73 times next year's revenues. And everybody goes on and complains and says, "Oh, this is madness and this is nuts." What CEO in America wouldn't want the kind of love and support that Palantir's received from retail? And Opendoor now, I would argue, it's probably surpassed Palantir as the number one beloved retail stock. And yet there has been silence from the existing management team and board towards this love. It's kind of bizarre. I mean, I have people emailing me or DMing me privately every day, including yesterday, last night, from Nepal, Antarctica, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Ghana, Nicaragua, Guatemala, New Zealand, Malaysia, Indonesia. Opendoor does no business in any of these countries. They only operate in the U.S. And yet these people around the world, China, they own this stock. I was told there's some hugely popular China, netizen Opendoor group sitting around talking about how this was such a massive opportunity, and there's nothing more American than growth stocks, crypto, and real estate. So of course it was going to be successful because it combines all three of those. So anyway, it's a golden opportunity. It's sitting there in front of them. To this point, they've really only trampled over it. And we're kind of doing it in spite of them, not with them. Imagine if they actually locked arms with us. The way that Alex Karp does video earnings calls, takes
Mm-hmm.
questions during earnings calls from retail. I mean, I told Adam Bain, who's the former head of sales for Twitter, who's now on the board, he's a venture capitalist now. I told him before the earnings call, the last one that Carrie did, you have to do the same things that Alex Karp does. You got to take advantage of this opportunity. Either Adam didn't pass it along or Carrie ignored it. They did the traditional hide behind an audio-only earnings call, 30 minutes in and out. It was just abysmal, and that's why she's gone.
Are you trying to get on the board?
I am.
Okay. Um, I'll end with this. You mentioned crypto briefly there, crypto treasury companies. Do you see that? You even said that they should consider buying Ethereum. I'm kind of curious to how buying Ethereum helps, Opendoor's core business, besides adding another buzzword to the company, a crypto treasury company.
Well, I have a bias. Like I'm very bullish on both Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm more bullish on Ethereum, and I believe that all corporations, large and small, up to Apple, should be buying Bitcoin and Ethereum and putting it on their balance sheet because it will create massive value for their shareholders over time. So it makes sense rather than just having cash sitting there somewhere in a bank account. And a lot of these companies, including Opendoor, would get basically 0% rates to kind of borrow money to do this if they wanted to. So I do think it's a positive for the company in terms of increasing value. Is it the core part of their business? No, but
Okay.
I mean, I just think everybody should do it. And
I wasn't sure if you had some like creative, I don't know, some sort of ETH lendings mixed with stable coins. Like there's some sort of like 4D chess move in the background that
I
you were
mean,
thinking.
obviously, I get like hundreds of ideas every day from all these retail investors, and the good ones I try to pass on to Opendoor management. And there's always the people that are telling me like, oh, they got to put every real estate transaction on the blockchain, and I got to be able to transact in ETH. If I could buy my house in ETH, that would be like the greatest thing ever. Maybe I don't know if you can make money from it. Hey, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, Eric, this was an awesome conversation. Clearly, you're very passionate about this. You're making a move to be on the board, and that's what we love to see. All the passion. So, thank you for being on today, and I'll be keeping an eye on the stock, no matter what, for sure.
Thanks. Great to be with you.